I recently got a request on my channel from Safety Home Loans to show how to create a highlighted text with background effect using Apple Motion, very similar to how you might see in something like Descript or CapCut. So today I'm going to show you how to do just that. Also, if you're a patron, you can download this right now and use it in your videos. First things first, open up Apple Motion. If you don't get the project browser, you can push Command, Option, and N. From there, we are going to select the Final Cut title. In the top right, I highly recommend that you set your presets as whatever you typically work with. So I usually work in 4K, and I also recommend that you set your frame rate to whatever you typically work with. Usually my tutorials are at 60 frames per second, but you might want to change this to something like 2997 or 24. From there, you can leave your duration at whatever you like and push open. Selecting the title, background, and type text here layers, we are just gonna delete those. Then we're gonna select the text tool and click anywhere in our viewer and type whatever we want to type. Then after that, we'll jump on over into our inspector where we can scale it up, we can reset the alignment, jump into our properties, and click on this down arrow to reset the parameter for our position so everything is perfectly centered up. With our text selected, we are going to go on up to our behaviors, find the text animation, and select sequence text. On the left-hand side, you should see this parameter option. Go ahead and select Add, Format, and Opacity. Then if we drag that opacity down to 0%, if we play through, you'll notice that the text is coming from 0% up to a full 100%. And that is because the sequencing is currently set to from. You'll also notice that there's a little bit of a fade happening for each character. That is because our spread is set to 1. Let's go ahead and set that to 0 and change the animate from character over to word. So now if we scroll forward, you'll see that each word pops up over time. And what's really cool is we can actually use keyframes to adjust how these words pop up. So if we come down to the speed settings, we can change it from constant over to custom. And from there, I'm going to click on this down arrow and reset the parameter so it's set to 0. So if I adjust this slider, that text is going to pop up. With our sequencer selected, we are going to actually push Command D to duplicate it. So now we should have two sequencers on this single text object. And this is how we're going to enable the highlighted text. Coming over to the left side, you can see our opacity slider. Go ahead and drag that up to a full 100%. Now what we're going to do is add another parameter, go down to face and select color. Now we can set this color to whatever we want to highlight our text. So I'm going to change the color over to my branded orange color, and you'll notice that as I adjust that custom speed, the orange is kind of spreading across it. But it's currently applying to multiple words, and we just want it to one word. So if we go ahead and change our sequencing from, we can change it over to through. So now we have the two sequencers working in tandem. We have the first sequencer, which is slowly revealing each of the words, and we have the other sequencer, which is adding that orange color to each individual word. So by using these together, you can get some pretty powerful effects. Let's go ahead and find our custom speed slider, and we'll click on this down arrow, add to rig, and we're going to create a new slider rig. In here, I'll go ahead and just call this the animate on slider. Then coming over to the left side, you'll see that we've got these two control points. If I drag this over to the far right, you'll see there's this blue dot indicator that I'm at this kind of keyframe area, and I can drag this to a full 100%. So if I drag this back to the initial point, it'll go back to where it was originally when we created this slider. I want this to actually go all the way down to 0, but what's important is we actually set this to be 0.1%. And that is because there's currently a bug in Final Cut Pro where it's going to randomly add in new keyframes that weren't there if we set it to a full 0%. So go ahead and just set it to 0.1% and it'll have the exact same effect. Okay, so we have our first slider and we can click and drag that and you'll see that orange is kind of spreading. Let's go ahead and add another slider, selecting our secondary sequence. We'll find our custom speed. I'll go ahead and just set this to 0.1%. And we can go ahead, click on this down arrow, add to rig, and find our rig in here and select add to animate on slider. Now, if I drag this over to the right, we'll just need to adjust this to be a full 100%. So if we adjust them now together, you'll see that the orange is revealing the text and the white is helping the text to remain on screen. Okay, so we have the highlighted text, and honestly, we could just publish this over into Final Cut Pro, but what if we wanted to add a backdrop? What we need to do is actually create a duplicate of this text item. So I'm going to push Command D. That's going to have these two sequencers. I'm going to go ahead and delete one of the sequence text items and we'll leave the others. I'm going to add another parameter. So we'll select Add, we'll go down to Format and find Rotation. Then we'll click on this down arrow to get our rotation options, and we're going to set that to 90%. So what this has done is if I go ahead and adjust my spread, you can see that this is actually rotating the text on slowly. Now, if we set this spread to 0, you'll notice that it looks exactly the same as with the opacity, where it's nothing's there and something appears. However, this is going to be really important for adding in the backdrop. So now what's super important is we need to change our sequencing from over to through inverted. And you'll see now that as I adjust the slider, one word is appearing at a time. And remember, these are being rotated on. This is going to be super helpful later for our backdrop. So we have one word appearing at a time. Now let's go ahead and add in the backdrop. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool. We'll just create it roughly in the same shape. It doesn't really matter. We'll change the shape size later. We'll go ahead and disable the outline, and selecting that rectangle, I'm going to push Command and left bracket to drop it down in the layer stack so that it's underneath the words. We can go ahead and adjust the color to whatever we like. We could even add in some nice rounding to get those corners looking a little bit better. Then from there, under the geometry settings, we're going to go to our size options. You'll see width and height, and we need to link these over to the text. Finding the width, we'll click on this down arrow. We'll add a parameter behavior and select link. Then we can drag in this text, this secondary text, I should say, drag that into that well. Now we can change under the compatible parameters. We'll go to Object Attributes, Size, and find the width. So now the width of the rectangle is linked to the width of the text, but you'll notice that it's only linking it to the one text item that's on the screen. And that's why it was important to add in that rotation parameter. For whatever reason, with Apple Motion, adding in that rotation tells this backdrop that the width is only that one word. So it's kind of a weird hack, but it is a great one to know. So now the width is linked. Let's go ahead and link the height. So I'll select our rectangle, go into the geometry settings, click this down arrow, and we'll link it once again. Drag in our text object, compatible parameters, object attributes, size, and height. So now both the width and the height are linked. But this rectangle is stuck in place. If we were to move this text object around the screen, you'll notice that that rectangle is just locked there. So with that rectangle selected, we'll go up to behaviors, we'll go to basic motion and select align to, then we can drag in that text object. So now this rectangle is going to lock to the position of wherever our text is. And because motion is seeing it as just a single object, it's going to automatically move along as more text is added. If you wanted to have more padding on the sides, you could adjust the X and Y offsets here in your linked parameters so that you have a little bit more room to work with in each word. Okay, so now what we've done is if we go to our sequencer and adjust the custom speed, you'll see that that background is following along with the text. But we don't want this text to actually be covering up the orange layer that we set up. All we need to do is go ahead and disable that text layer. Then selecting that text layer, we need to make sure that the text in this layer is always the same as our original layer. So coming down to the very bottom, you'll see there's this text box. We can click on this down arrow, add a parameter behavior, select link, then just drag in the original text layer. Now you'll see that object.text is linked from this secondary text layer to the primary. So anytime we change the text in here, both layers will have that exact same text. Now that we've done that, we can enable our original text layer, and I'm going to drop this rectangle one more in the layer stack, command left bracket, so that it's completely underneath everything. But you'll notice that our timing is off. So we'll jump into the sequence of that secondary text layer, find the custom speed, we'll click on the down arrow and send it into the rig for the animate on slider. Then from here, we can go to the far left, drag it down to 0.1%, again, very important. Then we'll go to the far right and drag it up to a full 100%. So now both animations are working together seamlessly. Something that is super important before we send this over to Final Cut Pro is we want to make it so we can actually adjust this as much as we possibly need. So if you want to adjust the scale or the color, anything like that, you're going to want to make sure that both text layers are linked up. To do that, you're going to need to go into the secondary text item, find each parameter you want to link, click on this down arrow, add a parameter behavior and select link, and then drag in the other text object and find that within the source parameters. So I'll go style, size. So now the size of both of these is linked up. That way, if we were to ever adjust the scale, you'll see how that background rectangle is linked. But there is an issue with this. Some of these cannot be linked. For example, the font cannot be linked. So if you wanted to adjust the font, you're gonna need to make sure you publish both fonts and change both of them in Final Cut Pro. It's definitely more complicated than I would like, but that is what you're gonna have to do if you wanna achieve this effect using Apple Motion. Also, the last and likely most important thing you're gonna want to link is the actual position. Currently, if I were to move around this text object, you'll notice that the rectangle is not moving around. So to fix that, we'll select our secondary text object, go to our properties, find the position, and of course add a parameter behavior and drag in the primary text object. And so now if we move these over, both will move together. Another thing that is very important, make sure you select your secondary text layer, come on down to the bottom and find this editable in FCP. Go ahead and uncheck that. That will make it so just this primary text layer is selectable. That way you don't accidentally select this invisible layer, which cannot be changed at all because it is linked to the primary layer. So I have all of my parameters set up. Let's go ahead and push Command S to save it. And we can just call this whatever we like. Then we can jump in whatever category we like and push publish. And because I was really stupid, I forgot one last thing. We need to go on into our animate on slider, click this down arrow and push publish. So now this will be available over in Final Cut Pro. Then we can push Command S and it should publish it over in Final Cut. So if we wanted to apply this in Final Cut Pro, we could just come on up to our titles, locate our speech to text and drop that in. If we wanted to change the text, we could just type in whatever we need. And we could even have a secondary line if we desired. So now all we need to do is just drag this animate on slider, add a keyframe for each word we want to be spoken, move forward until the next word is spoken, and then continue to increase the animate on slider until all of your words are there. And at the very end, if you decide that you don't like the timing on a specific word, all you need to do is right click on your title, select show video animation, then you can adjust these keyframes according to taste so that your words pop on exactly when they should. So that is how you pull off this effect. Remember, if you're a patron, you can download this right now and use it in your videos. Also, if this video was helpful, consider pressing that like button, consider subscribing, and you might want to check out this video where I show you 5 powerful effects that are already built into Apple Motion. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.